Corey and I here with you again. I'm going to do a little bit of commentary on our most recent leg workout. This was filmed on Tuesday, so here it is Friday, but we're going to get into it with you. So leading off with the workout, Corey and I decided to do some Romanian deadlifts. Now, the reason he and I decided to do these first, basically, he and I are both quad dominant. So with that being said, we're lacking in hamstrings a little bit. So walking into the gym, having fresh, energy, we're not fatigued at all. We wanted to put a little bit of extra focus into this particular movement before getting into our compound lift, which was squats.
All right, so as you can see, we're just warming up here. I think Chris is using 95 pounds. We did probably about 4 or 5 warm-ups. But then when we get into our working sets, you'll notice that we're not using an extremely heavy weight or anything. We're not doing, sumo deadlifts or conventional deadlifts. We're doing an RDL. So why go as heavy as you can when you're specifically trying to focus on using the hamstrings? Because like Chris said, we're kind of lacking in our hamstrings. And one thing that I want to point out is that I would not recommend a beginner or even an intermediate, unless they're into their more advanced intermediate stage or advanced trainee, to train like this, to try to prioritize things, because a beginner doesn't need to prioritize anything. They don't yet have any muscle groups that are lagging, or they don't know where their genetics aren't the best. So one thing we're doing here is we're training at a pretty low RPE, meaning we're not going close to failure or anything like that. We're using a lower intensity. We're training in the 8 to 10 rep range, and we're focusing on getting more volume opposed to trying to get close to failure, because after this we are squatting, and we don't want our RDLs to interrupt our main compound movement, which is the squat. So yeah, you can see here, I think this is still a warm-up set, but yeah, those are the main points I wanted to put out there. And we'll get on to our next.
Yeah, and guys, just real quick with these.
Oh yeah, I meant to point that out.
So guys, with this, one of the main things I want to point out that's helped me immensely in this exercise, when you're descending the weight, right? One of the biggest factors for me was a slight bend in the knees, but also you almost want to act as if you're taking the weight and you're pushing it through your legs, right? What that does is it allows you to keep a lot of focus and a lot of tension on that hamstring.
Yeah.
Coming up, it keeps you tight, but it really hammers it, for me anyway.
Yeah, and you should, especially in any form of deadlift, you should try to keep the bar as close to your center of gravity as possible. A lot of people might do an RDL where the weight's more in front of them. But as Chris said, just as an observation he's made, it helps a lot to keep the weight closer to your body, and I've realized that too.
With the exercise, RDLs are so similar to stiff leg deadlifts, but they're different in a sense. This is just one variation that's helped me.
Yep. All right, moving on to squats here. One main point that I want to focus on here with the squats is that you'll see it before every rep that we do. We try to take a nice deep breath in, into our stomach. It's called bracing. We push out on our belt. We do what's called the Valsalva maneuver. We take a deep breath in. We push our tongue to the top of our mouth, and we brace hard. We push out on that belt, and what that does is it helps keep us nice and rigid, And so when we're coming down into descent of the squat, we don't flop over like a noodle. We kind of stay nice and rigid. And as you can see here, I'm doing a low bar squat, and Chris feels more comfortable with the high bar squat. I just like the low bar squat because I'm more into powerlifting. It kind of reduces that lever a little bit, that lever arm, and I just feel more comfortable with the low bar squat.
Yeah, guys, there's no, and don't get me wrong, there is a right and a wrong way to do a squat, but when it comes to low bar versus high bar,
yeah,
there's no
personal preference thing.
That's ultimately what it comes down to, is what you're more comfortable with and what you find is more beneficial to your end goal, right? If you're trying to build strength, if you're trying to build bigger quads, bigger legs, it's whatever you find through your personal experience that seems the most optimal.
Yep. And actually, like Chris said, it's basically it's your own preference on what you feel most comfortable with. Most people are stronger in a low bar position just because, like I said, it lowers that lever a little bit, reduces it a little bit. That's what I meant. But another thing I want to point out is that some of the strongest people in the world, some Olympic lifters and stuff, well, not some of them, all of them do a high bar squat, and they're extremely strong. So when someone tries to say something like, oh, you need a low bar squat, this and that, okay, well, go look at an Olympic lifter and see the way that they squat. They high bar squat. So that goes to show you right there that you can get strong in a high bar, low bar, whatever it may be.
And not only that, you could even benefit from implementing both styles.
Exactly.
You could go in there and you could develop a program that actually incorporates both styles, that you're going to benefit from each in a certain way.
Yeah, and if you feel more comfortable being more upright in a squat, you high bar squat. If you feel more comfortable bending over a little bit more, that's more of the low bar position. You need to kind of bend forward in the low bar, and with the high bar, you're more upright, right? As you can see here, I think this is my first working set.
This was your first working set.
Okay, yeah. So, yeah, of course, I do a low bar position. I'm bracing. You see me pushing my stomach out into my belt before I descend down. You hold that brace throughout the whole entire squat until you get to the top, and then you brace again, right? And then you descend, and you just do it over and over again until your set's done. It might make your set last a little bit longer, but what it's doing is it's helping you stay nice and rigid and making sure that your form and technique is where it's supposed to be.
And, one thing with squats, as well as any exercise, really, range of motion plays a huge factor, right? When it comes to range of motion, and Corey mentioned this to me earlier, I don't know if we got it on video or not, but you got to acknowledge the fact that some people, their range of motion is based off of their actual capabilities.
Exactly.
Whether you have some type of a disability or you have some type of impaired flexibility or movement where you can only go to a certain level. The main thing you got to focus on there is you have to be able to go to your range of motion.
Yes. So a good way to look at it is do the range of motion that you can do, right? Do the maximum range of motion that you can do. But what I do like, I do see a lot in the gym is that new guys, they come in, they're beginners, right? They probably don't know what they're doing, but what they'll do is they'll throw way too much weight on the bar, they'll quarter squat down, they'll half squat down. In reality, what they should be doing is taking a weight that they can handle, right? Learning the mechanics of the squat, getting those neuromuscular adaptations that you gain as a beginner, doing the exercise properly, and then being able to maybe linearly progress over time as you get better in the squat.
And guys, just to make it a point here, right? Just because the exercise is uncomfortable, especially a squat is incredibly taxing on your entire body, right? Just because it's uncomfortable and you don't necessarily like doing it or you like the way it feels, don't let that be an excuse don't let that be the excuse of why you're not getting the full range of motion and why you're only going down a quarter of the way or a half of the way, as opposed to, that ass to grass saying, or even further than that, or even just above it, depending on your actual mobility.
Exactly, yeah. I believe, I believe everyone should squat, right? But if you don't feel comfortable doing a squat, instead of doing a half-ass squat, why don't you go do a leg press or something until you're comfortable enough with training, right, to actually be able to deal with that bit of pain that you feel from the squat. Maybe use a leg press, do something simple and then work your way up into squatting.
Right.
Not everyone starts out being able to squat a lot of weight, and a lot of guys don't like to go into the gym and make themselves look weak and whatnot. So they're not willing to put the weight on that they actually need to be able to adapt to their training. They start with a weight that's way too heavy.
Yep.
And I already pointed out.
And guys, one of the things that we stressed in the last video, your ego at the door, right? It's not about how much weight you can lift. It's about the quality of each rep. I'm a perfect example of this, right? So when it comes to me, I have what they call patella tendonitis. And the reason I have that is because my knees actually hyperextend backwards. So when I stand up, when I'm standing straight, as most people's legs will be straight, I look almost like an alien. I stand there like the friggin' Grinch, and I have this weird posture because my knees actually bend a little bit further backwards.
Yeah, it's like a genetic thing, right?
Right. So because of that, when I put a load on my back and I descend into a squat, it's much more taxing on that joint, and that after my squats are done, I'm incredibly sore from it. But at the same time, I'm not going to let that dictate my mobility and my actual movements. All I'm going to do is I might lower the weight a little bit. I might increase my volume so that because I'm not getting the progressive overload from the weight, I can actually get it from the extended amount of sets. You know, I'm still going to benefit from that.
Yeah.
You just have to learn how to adapt.
So there's many different ways that you can manipulate your training. But, you know, as he pointed out, there might be things that he needs to do to help him benefit from his training. But we were just doing calf raises, and what I want to point out there is that in the calf raise, you'll see a lot of people bounce at the bottom and whatnot. They use kind of that elastic energy to bounce out of it and then come up. A little tip that I want to point out to you guys is that actually, instead of doing that whole bouncing like a kangaroo thing and
Just see
building
guys
up all
going
that
like this on the calf machine.
Yeah, instead of building up all that energy in your Achilles and kind of bouncing, come down, pause for a couple seconds, come up, pause for a couple seconds, and I guarantee you'll see a big difference.
Right, because when you think about it, guys,
training.
if you're on a calf machine, right, or a press or whatever you call it, and you're sitting there going like this, explain to me how that's any different than if you take a walk down the street, right?
Yeah.
Your legs and
Except you're using some sort of load to do it, but again, your body is weight too. Yeah, it's just like you know, people do a lot of things that they are just doing to they almost try to like justify the weight that they're using to do something stupid.
Right.
Don't do that, you know what I mean?
Don't do that.
Try to do things properly, whether you know, maybe sometimes you don't want to do them properly because you want to look like the big bad boy in the gym or bad girl, whatever you are, but do things right, okay? And then you'll probably get the benefits that you're looking for out of your training as opposed to doing these stupid, you know, that's all I can call them, kind of stupid things. So,
this clip here, basically just summarizing the workout. We're doing that here, so there's no real need to listen to this. But one thing I kind of wanted to just touch upon, guys, is when it comes to these type of movements or these types of workouts, right? And especially if you're somebody new to weightlifting, you know, if there's anything you need to know or there's anything that you're unfamiliar with and you want to learn the proper form, technique, go online, check out some videos, but the biggest thing I can stress is make sure it's from a credible source, right? Just because you see a thumbnail on YouTube of, you know, this massive guy with muscle bellies and, you know, just because he looks the part doesn't necessarily mean he knows how everything is done and he knows the proper way of doing things, right?
Yeah.
There's many factors that could be involved with that.
So, yeah, a big mistake people make is they'll look at, you know, they'll go up, especially as a beginner, they'll go up to the biggest guy in the gym and think just because he's the biggest guy in the gym, that must mean that he knows what he's talking about. And of course he might know what he's talking about to a certain extent, right? But there's many other things at play. Drug use, you know, superior genetics, right? Make sure whenever you're trying, I know it can be hard to critically think, right? Especially when you're new to this and you don't know what to look for, right? It's hard because you don't know who's credible and who's not credible, okay? But it's very important to try to, you know, maybe go online and look up evidence-based things, you know? Start with you know, maybe start looking into research a little bit. I know it can be hard to understand, but research is a good way to get a starting point, right? And then you can make observations in your own training as to where to go with it, okay? That's the biggest thing I can say is try to use evidence-based approaches. Though it may be hard at first to learn them, you need to start somewhere, okay? So you can go online and just look up, you know, evidence-based training or something. A very good... somewhere very, very good for knowledge is Team 3D Muscle Journey. This guy Eric Helms, he's got a great series called the Pyramid, I think it's called, right? And he puts everything in. He puts them in sequential order. Yeah, exactly. And he also wrote a book. Those are some very good. That's probably the first thing I would tell a beginner to go look at, right? Is probably that those two things right there, the book and the series that he did on YouTube, to try to get a good understanding of where to start, okay? Because like he said, is you don't want to put the cart before the horse, right? You want to do things properly. That's a good place to start, right? And then just build upon that. And then you'll be able to build those critical thinking skills and learn, you know, more and more as you go.
And guys, one thing I just kind of want to reassure to you, right? Just because we're posting this leg workout, I don't want you guys to get the wrong impression and think that this is some cookie cutter way of developing these massive quads and becoming the strongest guy in the gym. You know, all Corey and I here are trying to do is basically show you our personal experience. You know, we're not the biggest guys in the world. We're certainly not the strongest guys in the world. But at the end of the day, you know, I've been lifting for a very long time, and although I may not know everything, I'm using my past experiences to continue learning and make progression in my own personal life when it comes to weightlifting in the gym.
Yeah.
You know, and what I'm essentially trying to do is prevent you guys from making the same mistakes I did back in the day, you know, because a good amount of my time lifting weights, it was a foolish way of doing things, and I'm sure I didn't benefit from it much, if at all. You know,
Yep.
so all I'm trying to do is basically relay my experience, and if Corey can, we're gonna try to help you guys in avoiding those mistakes, as well as looking forward as, you know, what am I going to do next and why am I going to do it? You know, look at
Yes.
the biomechanics of each movement, figure out why it's working and what it's actually doing for you, instead of just seeing the biggest guy in the gym moving some weight around and then going to try to copy his movement. You know, understand why it's doing what it's doing.
Yeah, I wish I had a mentor before I started lifting so I could not make all the mistakes that I made at first.
Right.
But of course, you need to start somewhere, right? And before I found out there was like an evidence approach or, you know, a way of going about training that is the right way, I had to learn mistakes and learn ways around it and find my way to where I'm at. So best information that I can give to you guys is try to go about things in an evidence-based approach, okay? Because science is science, right? It's gonna give you probably the best answers that you are looking for when it comes to training, when it comes to nutrition. And try to avoid a lot of those mistakes that me and Chris made at the very beginning, and most people do, right? No one knows exactly what to do right off the bat. So,
guys, we're all human beings, right? We're gonna make mistakes, but one of the best parts of being a human being is we learn from our mistakes. We're able to adapt and overcome based off past experiences, and that's essentially what we're trying to do here. We're trying to make you guys vigilant of what's going on and kind of trying to make that a learning curve.
yep.
So
Exactly. It's all about learning and just getting better over time. You know, you can't perfect things right off the bat.
Sure.
You know, you're just trying to progress over time and get better. And as you learn, you'll learn how to critically think and how to, learn the most efficient ways of doing things, opposed to, going into the gym and doing a million isolation exercises because you saw Jay Cutler online doing it, right? So,
anyways, guys, that being said, that pretty much concludes our video. If you guys have any questions, any information at all that you're trying to get from us, we'll do our best. We're going to do our absolute best in our most humble opinion. Again, we're not the best, the biggest, the strongest, whatever, but we're going to use our experience. We're going to use his meta-analysis, his factual-based evidence that he's researched himself. We're going to use that to try to implement it towards you guys' goals. And if we can help, we're going to do so in our best possible ability. So, if you guys like our video, please go ahead and click that thumbs up. Consider subscribing. We're going to try to post these much more often, and hopefully you enjoy them. So with that being said, thank you guys, and we appreciate it.